This happened a few years back when I moved to the city for work and needed a place to stay quickly. Hotels were draining my savings, and I didn't know anyone nearby. That's when a man named Ethan contacted me on Facebook, saying he had a room available. I checked his profile before replying. Normal photos, nothing strange. We FaceTimed later that night. He showed me the house, explained the rules, and mentioned that he owned the place outright. It was a small house in the middle of town, only 10 minutes from my office. Despite my parents' concerns, everything seemed fine. A week later, I moved in. Ethan met me outside and handed me a key. In person, the first thing I noticed was that he was very short, about my height. He helped carry my bags inside and showed me my room. It was already furnished. He said a previous roommate had moved out suddenly. I changed the sheets immediately. That first day, Ethan stayed nearby, making conversation, asking about my job, my schedule, where I like to go. Nothing inappropriate, just a little too much attention. The next day, he offered to show me around town. I agreed to be polite. He pointed out restaurants and shopping centers, then suggested we get lunch. I said I wasn't hungry. He then suggested drinks. I declined again. He pushed a little. I said no. After that, he went quiet. The rest of the drive felt tense. A few days later, while doing laundry, I noticed my hamper looked disturbed. The clothes weren't how I remembered leaving them. When I loaded the washer, I realized something was missing. I searched my room several times. I couldn't find it. I told myself there had to be a simple explanation. Still, that night, I wished my bedroom door had a lock. That weekend, I bought a locking doorknob and installed it while Ethan was out. For the first time since moving in, I felt safer. That night, I woke up to loud knocking. Someone was pounding on my bedroom door, calling my name. I checked the time. It was after 1 a.m. It was Ethan. I stayed silent and pretended to be asleep. Eventually, the knocking stopped. The next morning, I had several texts waiting for me. We need to talk. Be home after work. I asked if it was about the doorknob. Yes. I apologized and explained that having a lock made me feel safer. His response was short. It comes off today. What scared me most was realizing how he even knew I had changed it. I replaced the original doorknob. A few days later, there was a knock at the door while Ethan wasn't home. A woman stood there. She asked if I lived with him. When I said yes, she told me I needed to leave immediately. She warned me that Ethan had a history with women and that she had waited until he was gone to say something. I started packing as soon as she left. I found a small studio apartment across town that could take me right away. I texted Ethan and said a family issue came up and I had to move out. He returned home shortly after. He said he'd refund my rent the next day. Later that night, I woke up suddenly. Someone was sitting at the foot of my bed. It was Ethan. He told me to stay calm and said I shouldn't believe what other people said about him. I didn't hesitate. I ran out of the house and called the police. When officers arrived, they stayed while I gathered my belongings. Ethan acted calm and cooperative. One officer quietly told me he had dealt with him before. I left that night and stayed in a hotel. The next day, I moved into my new place. I've never lived with a stranger again, and I never will.
During my junior year of college, I moved off campus into a student apartment building. Roommates were assigned based on availability, and mine was a guy named David, someone else who just needed a place to live. At first, he seemed normal enough, friendly, polite, always smiling. He made small talk whenever we crossed paths and tried to be welcoming. But it didn't take long for things to feel off. David had a habit of lingering in my room. He'd stand in the doorway asking questions about my personal life, where I was from, who I talked to, what my schedule looked like. Sometimes he'd glance around my room while we talked, his eyes landing on my belongings a little too often. I told myself he was just socially awkward. Then there were the noises. Late at night, I'd hear movement coming from David's room, soft shuffling, quiet talking. At first, I assumed he was watching videos or on the phone, but the sounds were inconsistent, too quiet, too deliberate. One night, the noises kept me awake. I finally got out of bed and walked down the hallway. I pressed my ear against David's door. What I heard made my stomach tighten. He was whispering, not on the phone, not responding to anyone, just whispering to himself in a low, steady voice. I couldn't make out the words until the whispering suddenly stopped. Then he said my name. I froze. There was no reason he should have known I was standing outside his door. I backed away quietly and returned to my room, locking the door behind me. I barely slept that night. Over the next few days, the sounds continued, and David's behavior started changing. He'd glance at me when he thought I wasn't looking. His movements felt cautious, calculated, like he was always aware of where I was. One night, I woke up to whispering in the hallway. It was right outside my bedroom door. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. I walked over and pressed my ear to the door. The whispering stopped. Then, once again, he said my name. I asked if he was okay. There was no response. I only heard his footsteps slowly walking back toward his room. The following night, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door closing. I listened as footsteps moved down the hallway. That was the moment I knew something was seriously wrong. The next day, I confronted him. I asked if he had a history of sleepwalking or sleep disorders. He hesitated before answering, then said yes, sometimes. I didn't believe him. A few days later, when David left the apartment, I made a decision I wasn't proud of, but I didn't feel safe anymore. I went into his room. I searched quickly, drawers, closet, anywhere that might explain what was happening. I was about to leave when I noticed a small drawer tucked deep inside the back of his closet. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Most of them were of me, taken while I was asleep, different angles, different distances, some so close it made my skin crawl. Mixed in were photos of another guy around my age, someone I didn't recognize. That's when everything made sense. I took photos of the drawer with my phone and grabbed a few of the pictures as evidence. Then I packed my things. The next day, I went straight to student housing and showed them what I'd found. They told me they would handle it. I was reassigned to a different apartment almost immediately. I never saw David again. Even years later, I still think about those photos, about the whispering, about waking up to my door closing. I never found out who the other person in the pictures was, and I still wonder if he ever did. When things fell apart with my parents, I had no choice but to move out. I bounced between friends' couches for a while, but it was obvious that wasn't sustainable. Eventually, I started searching roommate apps and rental listings. That's when I came across an ad that stood out. A man named Luke was renting out a room in his 3-bedroom, single-story house. The rent was surprisingly affordable for my area, and the listing said he'd be gone most of the time. He also listed a few rules in all capital letters: no parties, no large gatherings, no drinking in the living room, and absolutely no access to the basement or attic. They seemed strict, but not unreasonable. I went to see the place in person a few days later. When Luke opened the door, I immediately got the sense that he was very reclusive. He was quiet, awkward, and avoided eye contact. His voice shook slightly as he showed me around. The house itself was nice, open layout,
clean. The bedroom was a good size and already furnished. Luke emphasized again that the basement and attic were off limits because he used them for storage. I agreed to the terms on the spot. 2 days later, I moved in. There was no lease, no paperwork. I paid month to month off the books. The bedroom had a lock, and Luke gave me a key, which at the time felt reassuring. He never told me what he did for work. He just said he wouldn't be home much. That turned out to be a lie. Every time I came home, his car was in the driveway. At night, I started hearing things, footsteps, doors opening and closing, movement just outside my bedroom. I brushed it off at first, assuming old houses just make noise. Until one night, when I went to the bathroom around 2 a.m., the basement door was open. There was a faint light coming from somewhere below, and I could hear banging noises echoing up the stairs. I stood there for a moment, frozen, trying to figure out what could possibly be happening down there. Then the noise stopped. Luke appeared at the bottom of the stairs and looked up at me. His expression wasn't startled. It was irritated. I apologized and told him I was just going to the bathroom. He snapped back and told me to shut the basement door. I did. I barely slept that night. About a week later, I came home from work and noticed my bedroom door was unlocked. I always locked it before leaving. I checked my room, and while nothing was missing, it was obvious someone had been inside. My clothes had been moved, drawers gone through. My closet door was slightly open. It hit me then that Luke must have his own key. I tried confronting him, but he didn't answer his bedroom door, even though his car was outside. Later that evening, I ran into him as he was rushing out the front door. I asked him directly if he'd been in my room. He stared at me blankly and said no. I mentioned the unlocked door and my things being moved. He claimed I was the only one with a key and said he was late for something. Then he left. I knew I couldn't stay there much longer. That night was the first time I noticed Luke's car was gone for more than a few minutes. Curiosity got the better of me. I checked the windows. His car wasn't there. I opened the basement door. There were no light switches, so I used my phone flashlight. The stairs creaked loudly as I went down. The basement was small and unfinished, with an old couch in the center and taped cardboard boxes stacked along the walls. There was a strange smell, stronger near a locked door in the corner. I didn't try to open it. I went back upstairs and locked myself in my room. I don't remember falling asleep. I woke up to the sound of the floor creaking next to my bed. Luke was standing over me in the dark. I screamed. He told me to be quiet and asked if I had gone into the basement. I yelled no and demanded to know how he got into my locked room. He asked if I was sure it was locked. I accused him of going through my things. He denied it, turned around and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he raised his hand in the dark, showing me it was empty. "I think you should find somewhere else to live," he said. Then he left. I packed everything immediately. I demanded half my rent back since I'd only been there 2 weeks. A moment later, Luke cracked his door open and extended his arm, handing me a small stack of cash without saying a word. I took it and left. I slept in my car that night. The next day, I went back to my parents' house and told them everything. Something shifted after that. They welcomed me back without question. I moved out again a month later, but on my own terms. If you're considering living with someone you met online, be careful. Some rules exist for a reason.
Like and subscribe.